Hello, everyone. Thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace. This is Alicia, and I love to share with you easy, budget friendly home decor DIYs, and I also like to throw in some recipes here and there. So I hope you enjoy what I have planned for you in today's video. And this time of year, I start putting out winter decor. I started this a couple of years ago when I have to take down all of my Christmas decorations, and I have a few DIYs to share with you guys today. So let's get crafting. For this first DIY, I used a couple of these wooden shadow boxes that I picked up at Hobby Lobby, and I started just by removing the price stickers and trying to get the adhesive off of the box. And I also removed the little sawtooth hangers from this box, as these are going to be a shelf sitter and I'm not going to be hanging them. And I actually used the back of the box as the front for my shadow box. I wanted to stain my boxes, and for that I just grabbed my Waverly Antique Wax and I stained all of the outer edges as well as the inside. I just left the back portion of the box plain and natural because I'm going to be doing something else with that. So I just went around all of the edges and removed some of the excess with a paper towel. And I also just left the back that natural wood color. If this was something that I was gifting or selling, I would go ahead and finish off the back with some of that antique wax color just to make that a finished look. But since it's just a decor piece for my home, I just decided to leave that as is. And here you can see how I just went around the inner rim of my shadow box with my antique wax, and I was just pretty careful in the corners there with my foam brush, trying to make sure I had good coverage and didn't miss any areas there. And I just did this for all four sides of my box, and once again just remove the excess with a paper towel. And I wasn't too worried about getting any of the wax on the back panel of the box, as I will be covering that up with some scrapbook paper. This scrapbook paper that I am using came from a multi-pack that I picked up from Hobby Lobby a couple of years ago, I think. And I just love the vintage vibes that I get from this piece that I chose. It has the antique sleds on there and just makes me think of wintertime and being outside and playing in the snow. And I just went around the edge of my box and just pressed down firmly to give me some creases in my paper as a guide to go by to just cut that out. And I just went around that with my scissors and made sure that all of my edges were even and that they would fit inside my box very well. And once I had my scrapbook paper cut to size, I grabbed an Elmer's glue stick and just spread that in a thin layer on the back of my box and just applied the paper there, just smoothed that out. I didn't have any issues with getting that to stick well. I love using the glue stick for these kind of projects. It just works very well and not a lot of mess. I wanted to soften the edges a little bit there where the paper and the box met, so I just grabbed some of the antique wax again and just went around the edges and in the corners to help blend those two areas in a little bit better so they weren't quite as noticeable. And it also gave the paper a little bit of a vintage antique look. And I also went across the entire sheet of scrapbook paper just to give it that rustic look. Next, I started working on all of the pieces that will be going inside of the shadow boxes, and I had some of these wooden snowmen, and I believe I got these from Hobby Lobby a couple of years ago as well, and they've just been in my stash and I haven't used them yet. So I had 5 total of these that I decided to paint to go in both of my shadow boxes. and I painted the little top hats with the Waverly chalk paint in ink, and the bodies I of course did with the Waverly chalk paint in white. And I just had this set up as an assembly line. I painted one of the hats and moved on to the next snowman, and by the time the hats were dry, I was able to start painting the bodies. This smaller angled brush worked really well to paint the bodies of my snowmen. I was able to get under the hat and not have any of the white overlap onto the black, and it just took one good coat of this Waverly chalk paint on these snowmen. I had really good coverage, and I decided to just leave these plain and not do any facial features. I was afraid I might mess those up. I'm not too good with the smaller details sometimes, and I liked the way these looked, just left plain without any eyes or mouth or nose. You guys let me know what you think about that, if you would have added a face to your snowman. I also had these mini snowmen that I had picked up in a couple of packs, and I think they came from Dollar Tree last year maybe, but I just painted them the exact same way as I did the larger snowmen, the black top hats and the white bodies, and just set those aside to dry until I could start working on the next pieces for the shadow box. I just kept finding all these cute little things in my stash that I wanted to add to my shadow boxes. I had a pack of these little mini wooden Christmas trees, and I just gave them one good coat of my Waverly chalk paint in fern, and these were ready to go. After all of my pieces had dried, I went back in with some of my Waverly chalk paint in white and just added a little snow detail here and there. I just wanted it to look like there was some freshly fallen snow on the hats of my little snowmen and as well as the trees. When all of my pieces had dried completely, it was time to start assembling my shadow boxes. First of all, I just did a dry placement of all of my items to see where I liked everything the best before I started gluing it down. So I had my larger sized snowmen, the mini ones, the small wooden trees, and then I had a few different sizes of the bottle brushes that I had gotten from the Dollar Tree and Hobby Lobby as well, and I just arranged those how I liked them in the shadow box. And once I had the placement figured out the way that I liked it, which honestly probably took me 2 or 3 tries until I got everything in there the way that I liked it the best, I just took some hot glue and glued everything down. I just left it sitting where I had it originally, otherwise I would totally forget the placement that I put everything, and that was just the easiest way for me to do that. I just had the shadow box setting up and just removed one piece at a time and just added the glue to the bottom and placed it back in the box. And I had a few extra of the wooden trees and the mini snowmen, so I just decided to add those to the tops of the boxes as just a little bit of extra embellishment, and I think that turned out really cute. A final finishing touch for these boxes was just to add some of the faux snow that you can get at either the Dollar Tree or Hobby Lobby, and I like this one that is kind of the iridescent colored, and I just took some hot glue and put that down in areas where I wanted the snow, and just placed the snow on the glue and knocked off the excess. And I did this for the top of the box as well as some areas inside the box, and that is it for this project. You guys let me know how you like this one. This one is really cute and I think it turned out great. So I like to find pieces at thrift stores that I can repurpose and give new life to. And I actually found this book stack while we were on vacation. I do like to go to thrift stores in different areas that we might visit throughout the year, and I picked this one up. And I just started by removing the price stickers and giving this a good clean to remove any of the dirt that may have accumulated. After I had cleaned the box, I was ready to start painting, and I just gave this a good coat of the Waverly chalk paint in white. And this took 2 coats to completely cover the pink that was under there. And I will say this particular piece was a really good size, and while I was painting, I tried to be careful not to get a lot of paint inside those little crevices there. I wanted those to be visible so you would have definition between each of the books in the stack. I did decide to use my heat gun to help dry the chalk paint. I was in a bit of a hurry this day for this project, and instead of waiting for that to dry on its own, I just used my heat gun and just went around the areas so I could start painting the second coat. There were just a few areas where I did get some of the paint inside the little crevices, and I just took a toothpick and went back through over those, and they were easy to just knock out there, and that just gave me some clean lines that I wanted to keep for my books. I grabbed some of my Waverly Antique Wax and just went around all areas of my book stack. I wanted this to look vintage and antique, maybe like it had been sitting on the shelves in the library for a while, or it had been passed down from generation to generation. I just wanted it to look like it had some age to it, so I just gave that a really good dry brushing around the corners and around each of the books on the spine as well. And I love the way this turned out. It just looks vintage and rustic. And I also paid close attention to each of the crevices. I wanted those to look more detailed so you could have more definition between each of the books. I know a lot of book stacks don't have a cover to them. They just have titles on the spines of the books, but I wanted to do something a little bit different and display this a little bit differently. So one of my favorite techniques to do is to print on the tissue paper and apply that to my book stack. So the way I do that is I just tape down my tissue paper to a piece of computer paper, and be sure that you print on the matte side of the tissue paper and not the shiny side. Before you print your design, just make sure you have all of your edges taped down really well, that there's nothing left that's sticking up that could get caught in your printer. And then you're ready to just send it through your printer and print your design. Once that's done, you just want to let your ink dry for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Then you can remove your tape and get your design ready to cut out and be put on your project. So I found this particular image on Creative Fabrica. It came in a bundle of winter images. I think it was woodland, winter animals, something like that. I'm not sure. But I picked this one because this is a phrase that me and my husband will tell each other in the wintertime. When it's really cold, we'll say it's snuggle weather. So that's why I liked this one. If you don't have Creative Fabrica, you could also find an image on Google that you really like, and you can find several cute ones that you could download for free, especially if you're not planning on selling this piece. But I just roughly cut out around the edges of this and got it lined up with my book stack. And then I just took some Mod Podge and put down a light coat of this on the cover of my book, and I like the way that this Mod Podge works with the tissue paper technique. It's very easy to do for me, and even if it does have some wrinkles, I don't mind that because that just adds to the rustic look that I want for this piece. While your Mod Podge is still wet, you want to apply your tissue paper, and I centered mine just over to the right side of my book, and I tried to start from the center and work my way out, just smoothing out any bubbles. And like I said before, I don't mind the wrinkles, that just gives it a little bit of character on your book. But just continue working that out until you get everything smoothed out and it looks the way you want it to. And to remove just some of the excess tissue paper, I grabbed a piece of my sandpaper from a pack that I had picked up at the Dollar Tree, and I just went around the edges very lightly, and that easily removed any of that excess paper. So I naturally wanted my book titles to be wintry, so I just did a quick Google search and looked through some ideas and picked 3 that I really liked that I thought would look good on this book stack. And I just went into my Cricut design space and typed these out, and I picked 3 different fonts that I thought would complement each other really well, and I cut those out with my Cricut Joy, and I weeded out the extra space in my phrase, and then I just applied these with some transfer tape to my book stack, and these were very easy to apply. And I used the paper transfer tape. It's one of my favorites to use when I have a project that has paint on it. And for some reason, part of the Y just didn't cut out at all. So I just went back in with a fine tip Sharpie and just fixed the area that was missing, and you couldn't even tell that I had done that. And when your cover has completely dried, you just want to take some more Mod Podge and do another layer over that, just so that everything is sealed really well. And when your cover has completely dried, you just want to take some more Mod Podge and do another layer over that, just so that everything is sealed really well. And to embellish my book stack, I just took some of this navy blue satin ribbon and also some burlap ribbon. And the burlap ribbon came from the Dollar Tree, and the satin ribbon I got in a big multi-pack from Amazon several years ago, and I'm still using that, so it was a really good deal for my budget. And I just cut out the links that I wanted for the books, and hindsight is 20/20, as they say, and I should have made this go completely around the books and just joined on the back instead of trimming that off, but I didn't. But I may go back in and just cover that up again. But I just secured down both the satin ribbon and the burlap with some hot glue and just placed that over to the left of my image. And I overlapped those. It took me just a little while to decide how I wanted to do that. I didn't want to completely cover up that blue, so I decided just to overlap the burlap a little bit and leave some of that blue peeking through so that you could have that pop of color. Just to make sure that my ribbon was secure and wouldn't slide off of my book stack, I just went back in with some hot glue in a few places on the front side and just made sure I had both of those ribbons tacked down really well. And a final touch that I wanted to do for this particular project was a shoelace bow. So I just took a piece of the navy blue satin ribbon and some jute and just did a simple shoelace bow with both of those, and I just secured that with some hot glue in the top left corner of my book stacks, and just trimmed off the tails, and this project was finished. After the holidays, I really try to get back to my healthy eating, and I enjoy coming up with really tasty, healthy recipes, and this is one of those, so I hope you guys enjoy this one. So to start this recipe, you will need to bring 2 cups of liquid to a boil, and I like to use chicken stock for this one. And you'll also need to rinse 1 cup of quinoa and get that ready to add to your pot. While your quinoa is cooking, you'll want to get your veggies ready, and I always have baby carrots on hand, so that's what I typically use for this recipe. And you want to dice those up, and it normally takes about a cup to a cup and a half, and I will have the full recipe in the description box, so check there if you would like to type this out yourself or print it so you can have that on hand. And just a little bit more about quinoa. I discovered this grain a couple of years ago when I was trying to lower my cholesterol. I wanted to replace some of the carbs in my diet with a healthier food, and quinoa really fit the bill for that. It is considered a superfood, and it's just really great for you. It has lots of health benefits, so you could check out some more information about that online. You will also want to dice about a quarter to a half a cup of onion to go in this recipe, and I like to use the sweet yellow onions. They have the best flavor and aren't quite as strong to me, so that's usually my go-to. So just dice those up really fine, and you can put those with the carrots until you're ready to add those to your skillet. I love to use a cast iron skillet for this recipe. It just gives you really good color on your quinoa. So you want to get that preheated and add some cooking spray and some olive oil. Then you will add your veggies and season those with salt and pepper, and you will just saute those for about 10 minutes until they're tender. So your quinoa should be cooked and ready at this point to add to the veggies. And if you haven't figured it out yet, we are making a version of fried rice. So this is fried quinoa, which is a lot healthier for you. So you just mix that in with the veggies, and you will let that cook undisturbed for about 5 minutes, just so it will develop some really nice golden color. After that 5 minutes is up, you can turn your quinoa and you will see this beautiful golden color as that has got crispy on the bottom. And I normally add a little bit of extra olive oil at this point, and I will continue to let this cook for another 5 minutes, turn it again, and add more olive oil as needed. And you can do this until it's the crispness that you like. To finish up this fried quinoa, I add about 2 tablespoons of butter and some frozen green sweet peas to this, and those will just thaw out and be super soft and just give this a really nice pop of color, much to my husband's dislike. He doesn't really like the green peas, but me and the kids do. And this is ready to serve, and I typically serve this with either grilled chicken or salmon. picked up this really cute tree skirt at the dollar store a while back, and I knew that I wanted to make some kind of pillow or pillow covering or something out of this. So the first thing that I did to get started is I just cut the entire tree skirt in half. I was trying to get this into smaller, more manageable pieces and get some of those rounded edges straightened up to be easier to work with. So I just took the half of the tree skirt and cut that in half. So I'm going to be working with just a fourth of this tree skirt. And I just used my ruler and my rotary blade to get me a nice clean edge to work with. So I realized at this point that the backing would easily remove from the front piece of the tree skirt. So I just took my rotary blade once again and removed that binding that they had on the edge, and the front piece and the back piece will now be the front panel and the back panel to my pillow. Just continuing to cut down my pieces of fabric now so I can get them into a rectangular shape with straight edges, so it's easier for me to sew and put together. So I'm just making sure on my cutting mat to line up my fabric with the lines on the mat, and then I just line up my ruler as well with each of those lines on the mat. I hope that makes sense. Maybe you guys can see that better in the video. And I just take my rotary blade and just trim up all of those edges, trying to get everything as straight as I possibly can, because I know that will make sewing this on my machine so much easier. I had plenty of extra fabric left over, so I decided that I wanted to make a second pillow. So I just took that piece and repeated those same steps of lining that up with the lines on my cutting mat and just using my rotary blade and making sure I was getting nice, clean, straight edges. For both pillows, I just used the front panel as a template to cut out the backing fabric. So I just laid that over the top and made sure that it was completely covering a portion of the backing, and just took my ruler and my rotary blade and just cut that out as best as I could, making sure that I got that as even as possible, because that will make sewing so much easier. I measured each pillow so I could get the correct sizing for the iron-on vinyl that I'll be using. I picked out some designs that I had in my files and uploaded those to Cricut Design Space, and I cut those out using my maker, and I weeded them and got them ready to apply to each pillow. When you're using iron-on vinyl, be sure that you follow the instructions for that particular type of vinyl that you decide to use. I've been using ones from the Paper Studio recently. Normally, I don't have any issues with getting that to apply to my project, but this one was, I don't know, it was just difficult for some reason, and I did follow the instructions. I was supposed to heat my press up to about 315 degrees and preheat the fabric, place my design, and then just iron that on for 30 seconds on the front, turn it over, repeat that process on the back. But this one, for some reason, did not want to adhere to my fabric, so I had to repeat that 5 or 6 times. And I also said this was a warm peel vinyl, but in the end, I eventually figured out that it worked as a cool peel, so that's what I wound up having to do in the end. When I finally got my vinyl to adhere to my fabric, I just carefully removed that carrier sheet and I still had a few small places that pulled up from the fabric, but in the end it still looks really good and I like the result. To get your pillows ready to sew, you will need to get the front and the back fabric piece put together. So you'll want to put the top piece right side down or pretty side down, as some people say, and you'll want to either pin that or clip that around all 4 of the sides, and be sure that you leave a space at the bottom of your pillow or whichever side that you choose to do that on. So you can leave that open so you'll be able to turn and stuff your pillow. I use these wonder clips that I got from Amazon. They work great for fabric projects. And I also just trimmed off any of the excess fabric from the backing to make sure I had nice even edges. When you have your pieces pinned or clipped together, it's time to sew them. I like to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end of my seam, and that just makes sure that it doesn't pull apart. And I just sew all the way around on all 4 of the edges. I try to make sure that my stitching looks good, as well as making sure that I'm picking up both the top and the bottom piece so I don't have any gaps in my fabric, and so my seams won't come loose while I'm stuffing. You'll want to just trim off any of your excess threads that you have, and I also like to go around and trim a small triangle off of each of the corners. This will just make it easier to turn and to stuff your pillow. To turn my pillow form right side out, I like to start in one of the far corners and just gently grab the fabric and easily pull that through. I try not to pull too hard or tug because sometimes that could rip your seams and then you would have to go back and restitch those. But just keep working that carefully, and I also take either a pencil or a paintbrush into those corners to help to make sure that I get those pushed out correctly so that I can get the stuffing all the way into the corners and I have a full pillow. I like to take a larger piece of my stuffing and just pull that apart into smaller pieces and just fluff that a little bit. That seems to make it easier to get the stuffing in, and it also helps to be able to get that in and shape your pillow a little bit easier. And I also use something to help get that stuffing into the corners of my pillow. I started out using a pencil to help get my stuffing in, and then I decided to use this spatula. It was a little bit longer, and that helped me to get my stuffing into the corners to make sure that everything was stuffed and filled and I would have a good shape to my pillow. When your pillow is stuffed, it's time to close that seam that we left open at the bottom. And to do that, I just used some fabric hot glue, and I decided to do that instead of hand stitch this closed because I didn't want to have any threads visible at the bottom of my pillow. And this fabric glue worked really well, and I didn't have any issues with getting that to stay closed. This last project is really quick and easy to make. I picked up a couple of frames from the Dollar Tree, and to start off, I just removed the backing and the glass from the frames, and I gave that a really good clean. And I like to use a mixture of vinegar and water when I'm cleaning any frames or windows. It works really well, doesn't leave any streaks or doesn't pick up a lot of lint from your paper towel or your cloth that you're using. And this project took me maybe 10 minutes to complete, but it is just something that's really quick that you can do when you don't have a lot of time. Even though this picture frame was wrapped in plastic, the front still had a lot of lint and dust, so I gave that a good clean as well before I put my picture in. I know I mentioned Creative Fabrica quite a bit, but that's one of my favorite places to find images, and the ones that I chose for my picture frames came from there as well. They were actually part of the same bundle as the birds that I printed off for my book stack in my earlier project. So I just printed these out to size, and I printed them on some white cardstock and just cut them out to fit my frames. Now all you have to do is just put everything back together for your frame and make sure that it's securely fastened with those little tabs. And I did have one of mine that broke, so I just went over that with some hot glue to make sure the back wouldn't pop off my frame. So that wraps up the projects for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed these, and I would love to know which one is your favorite. If you could just leave me a comment, I love to read those. And I hope you consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss any of my future content. Give this video a thumbs up and click that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one.